Welcome to the RaceGuru Thunder Hour. As always, you have myself, Fantasy Bosco on Twitter, Rich Maletto here, and Sean Engel always standing by here. You get to see him on front of the screen here on the RaceGuru Thunder Hour instead of all the backstage work he's always doing. You can find Sean on Twitter at SeanE247. Boy, you got a nice, easy handle, man. I got to spell mine out and stuff. It's crazy. But, hey, remember, you can find this podcast. You can find the audio. You can find it on the YouTube channel. This is all brought to you by FantasyGuru.com and the Elite Plus Network. Please check out the website at FantasyGuru.com. We have all sorts of packages for you. If you want to catch all the racing stuff and NHL, NBA, which I get the seasons are running out, but hey, this covers you for 12 months, so you get the start of next year and then some. Go to FantasyGuru.com. Check out the MVP all-in game time package for $39.99. And hey, if you're interested in some of the other sports, you want to get baseball going, you want to get football going, reach out to support. I believe it is support at FantasyGuru.com. You can find the little link on the website there, and they will get you all situated. You tell them what they want, what you're looking for, and they will make sure they get you with the right package. Sean, right. I am excited because we have a special guest this week. One of our staff members. We've been fortunate enough to learn and know Mark here the last couple of years, but we have DFS Marlin, none other than Mark Hogan. Mark.
Yes.
Welcome to the show, man.
Appreciate y'all having me on. Looking forward to talking some NASCAR and winning some money this weekend.
Winning money. This seems to be something you do on a regular basis. I want to do a little call out. Every year, at least once or twice a year, Mark comes into the chat showing some of the winnings from DFS, and I got to tell you, they are impressive. I mean, Jeff was talking about them on air a couple of weeks ago. I believe you took down, was it 10K, I want to say, that you took down about a month ago? Is that right?
Yeah, nice little 10K. I think it was 10K. Yeah, something like that. Some of the wins blend together. No, not to be too arrogant there. But no, in all seriousness, yeah, it's been a nice start to the NASCAR season. Quite frankly, I've been doing NASCAR since I think like June or July of last year. So really not even that long. But last year had a couple big wins similar to that. So I think it's a testament to the content that you guys are putting out, and then applying a good process, blending the two, ultimately to create a winning formula.
I can't lie, Mark. You had some really nice things to say. I know you and I talked kind of offline, if you will, last year. You were like, man, it's like you guys are printing money at NASCAR over here. And you said to me, you go, I'm not big in the NASCAR. I follow it a little bit. I take a look at the guys' articles. I do, knowing what you know and the betting savvy that you have, about checking the odds and seeing trends and all those sorts of things. I'm really curious to talk to you about the process because, hey, we're giving you the content, right? But you have the process, and it's your process, I think, that really sets you above and beyond everybody else. I mean, we all get jealous when we see those kinds of winnings. Hooray, congratulations. Now we want to figure out how can we be as good as Mark, right? So I'm really curious to pick your brain on the process. I'm really excited about it. I love seeing those wins, man. I mean, honestly, Sean, correct me if I'm wrong. That's what we put the content out here for, right? I mean, what we all want money, don't get me wrong, but man, does it feel good to know when someone's like, well, I read your stuff and this is what I put together. And I don't know, it makes me smile.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And I'm not going to go ahead and correct you there because that's exactly what we do this for. That's why we also have this podcast going, so we can get ourselves some early impressions through all the subscribers each and every week and have a little fun and chatting about some NASCAR. So that's why we're here. That's why we're going out forth and getting it done.
Well, I don't want to go too far without giving Mark an opportunity to kind of tell us about his background, because he does have a very unique and fun background that I think gives our subscribers, our members, an inside edge talking other sports, specifically football here, that I don't think you're going to get anywhere else. So, Mark, give us a little background on you and some of the content you're producing for us at FantasyGuru.com.
I appreciate that. So for me, I started off working in the sports industry. And so I actually worked for the New York Mets for roughly 7 years or so. I worked in their ticket sales department, so wasn't directly attached to the players or anything like that, but got to see a lot of the behind the scenes logistics that a lot of these teams work through. And then transitioned over and worked in the XFL in 2020 before COVID, unfortunately, folded the league before that. So got to see a lot of the inner workings on how that league not only formulated, but where those players came from and just the background on the types of players that are in that league. And, really it helped me after that. Once I left the XFL, I started, when it came back and the USFL came into play, I started wagering on it, and I was doing NFL throughout. So just applied the same process to some of those leagues, and never stopped following it. So that's kind of where it started as far as creating content goes. And then, of course, keeping up with the NFL on a year-to-year basis. I started branching out and got into baseball, had some nice wins in baseball. I had a 15K win last summer in baseball. So basically starting to apply my process to bet on the sports that I used to work in, and it's helping. So but it's I think it's analytical / more based off the odds, right? A lot of my process, I like to look at Vegas and shop Vegas odds and numbers and compare that to pricing, and kind of start up with my base foundation from there.
Well, the content you've been producing has been fantastic. The stuff we hear from the members, they love it. I love it. I do think you bring in a unique perspective. Most of the staff, I don't think, has worked in any shape or form, whether it's ticket sales or in the front office or anything like that. I think you bring some nice insight that we don't have anywhere else. And quite frankly, your content is bar none to anyone else out there. So we're fortunate to have it on the team and on the staff. I know I'm excited when they announced it. So kudos. And the stuff you've been putting out on the US or the UFL, I'm getting them all confused now between the XFL, USFL, UFL. So I apologize. You guys can correct me when I screw that up. But I think what was it? Your last article came out on Friday. I think you had us covered for the games this past weekend on UFL. Is that correct?
The week prior, and then I'll have Jorge. Jorge had this week, and then had last week, and I have this week. So
okay.
Doing UFL content. We did a little bit of preseason content last year for the NFL, and having a lot of success with NASCAR, quite honestly. So, I mean, NASCAR,
awesome.
Honestly, I made more money playing NASCAR last year than UFL or the XFL and USFL and any of that. So, got to keep playing it.
I don't know, man. That's kind of a big compliment for us, Sean. Like, I take that as a good look. It's Mark's work. I don't want to take anything away from him. Okay, let's be real straight on that. I'm not the one cashing $10,000 contests, but I know, as you and I've talked, that your background and stuff, and you're very sports knowledgeable. But we kind of live and breathe this stuff, right? So that really makes me smile, and I'll be bragging about that for a while. So. But hey, well, let's get into the show. Let's get into some NASCAR. We've got some news and notes that we want to go over. We're going to try to kind of fly through this because I really don't want to take away from the discussion on the DFS side of things and the sports betting things. So Sean and I are going to tag team this with Mark here. We're going to fly through it. We definitely have some big news that needs to be discussed. So let's dig in, Sean.
But first, before we get right on into that, let's recap the weekend at Talladega, because there's a lot to discuss from Talladega with the weekend there. We had two races, the Xfinity Series and the Cup Series race. Let's get into the Xfinity Series. And first, with that, it was basically a Talladega race that you expected with a couple of wrecks, but fuel mileage was also a very, very big story at the end. And that really played into the fact with Jesse Love winning his first career Xfinity Series race just by making the fuel last longer than anybody expected there, Rich.
Yes. And woo, sure made me smile, man. Since I had him bold in the overview article, since I pushed him, I don't know how many which ways till Saturday, I was happy to see him pull it off. We knew the RCR cars were going to be running up front. Austin Hill just got turned. He caught some bad luck. His bad luck at Talladega is uncanny. He has been so good at Daytona and Talladega. He was a shoot. People were pushing him everywhere. I did fade him because I was buying into the bad luck. The poor guy just can't seem to catch a break at Talladega. Runs well and does not finish well there. And once again, the big bad Bama track bit him.
That is for sure. But even so, he still had a strong performance as RCR ended up sweeping both of the stages in the Xfinity Series race there overall. Mark, did you end up catching any of the Xfinity Series race this past weekend?
I did. I unfortunately got burned by Mayer, Kligerman, and Brandon Jones in the same lineup. So for me, it was, victim of some of these crashes, but I did have Love. So, I was on Love thanks to Rich and you guys being on him. But unfortunately, just luck didn't go my way for this race. And man, whenever I have a guy that gets in a crash, especially if it's early in the race, it is very demoralizing to try and watch the rest of it. So.
And the sad thing is that a place like Daytona or Talladega, we can have one wreck and take out half the field. And that one wreck could happen 10 laps in, usually doesn't, but it can. We've seen it. It can happen with 10 laps to go and anywhere in between. And it does. It is really, it's a kick in the gut, right? When you see that happen, especially when you got the leader, especially when you have, say, Austin Hill, who had been dominating the race. We didn't really push dominator points, but he was on his way to really being, if you had him in your lineup, if he finishes top 5, you were going to have more points from him than just about anyone else in the field because of all the laps he led and so on. So,
yes.
I feel your pain, Mark. That is, I scaled back last week. I promised myself I would, and I'm glad I did because those wrecks. If I tell you what, Sean, if we could do one thing better, I want to get good at predicting wrecks and who's in them. If we could do that, I'm pretty confident we could print money at this point.
Oh, for sure. Especially when you consider some of those drivers that avoided the wreck in the Xfinity race. That led to a lot of surprising finishers inside the top 15. Here, I'll go through the list real quick. Leland Honeyman Jr. in 4th, Brennan Poole in 5th, Cesar Becquerel in 7th, Matt Benedetto in 8th, Mason Massey 11th, Haley Deegan with her best career Xfinity finish at 12th, and Kyle Seek in 14th. Can you really predict drivers like these in order to really place this high on an everyday basis, Rich?
No, and I tell you what, Mark, I don't know all the numbers off the top of my head, but I'm pretty sure with those names he listed, I could have put together an optimum lineup using half the money that we were given on DK. I mean, it had to be somewhere in that ballpark because 3/4 of those drivers he listed were right around $6,100 or less.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's something to remember for maybe this track in the future too, right? Is don't be hesitant to leave money on the table. That'll make your lineup different, even if you've got some chalky plays in there. So, I mean, it for me was, I don't know. I think just in general, I think you said it before perfectly. This was a perfect weekend to scale back on your overall bankroll. This weekend upcoming is a great weekend to invest a little bit more in my opinion. So, and it's mainly because of the track and, some of those, crash potentials there.
Well, and you hit, I mean, I'm pretty sure we referenced a couple of times, hey, don't sweat leaving a couple $1,000s on the table. Well, I went a little rogue. One of our members has a contest he runs each week. Mark, suggest checking it out, get in there. Kiowa will tag everybody. He tries to fill it. I don't think we filled it yet. Sean and I will partake. It's like $2, not big money or anything. It's more kind of a fun thing. Well, what I did was I threw Blaney in and I threw in a bunch of people that qualified in the 30s and had like 30-some $1,000 left, right? Took that lineup and I got, you know how it is, guys. You're like, I should put this in a contest. Like, what if something happens? I should put this in a contest, right? So I took it and I threw it in a dollar contest. And I'm looking, I said, I don't like having duplicate lineups. It's a bad juju thing in my mind. So I'm like, I got to make a change. So I had all this money left and I'm like, why don't I pull out BJ McLeod and put in Kyle Larson? I don't know how many people are going to be on Larson. He should be chalky, but because of the whole pass through and everything else, I'm like, I can see some people fading him. I'm not worried about it. There's going to be enough wrecks. There's going to be enough laps. It's early enough. He'll probably get the lap back anyway. So I said, screw it. Threw it in there. Didn't think much about it. Well, after the race finished, sure enough, wasn't a big cash day. The dollar lineup paid $5, $6, $7, but it cashed. And I had $20-some $1,000 left to spend on a salary. So to your point, Mark, I've always noted a couple thousand. No. I think you hit it best, Mark. Note it for the future that when we go back to a Daytona, Talladega, and Atlanta, you know what? Maybe we should just focus on building a lineup with a whole bunch of money left over, to Mark's point, to be contrarian, to make it even a little bit more different. I mean, we've seen crazy stuff happen because I tell you what, I don't think anyone had an optimal lineup for Saturday. So Yeah. Hey,
Nope.
you look at those names, and honestly, how many people had more than 2 or 3 of those names even in a lineup?
For real. For real.
You know?
I mean,
So, yeah. Sunday's event was a little different, Sean. I'm going to let you talk about it because I'm still salty about it, and I'll go on a tangent and go off on some sort of weirdo rant. So why don't you go ahead and give us a cover on the Cup Series here?
All right. So regarding the Cup Series race at Talladega, it ended up starting out with Michael McDowell leading everybody to green, but all throughout the race, there was a variety of different drivers pulling their way to the front, but most of them were a lot of Ford-based drivers, from Stewart Haas Racing, Team Penske, Front Row. A lot of the Ford teams were just basically towards the front for a good amount of the day overall. But then I'd say during the final stage, that's where we started really getting a sense of a big dominator of Michael McDowell returning back to the front. He ended up leading the most laps of the day, at about 36 laps overall. And then he pretty much was holding strong up front. Then the last lap happened, and ultimately trying to block the field. He didn't get to Brad Keselowski in time. He made a little bit of contact, got loose. McDowell wrecks. Keselowski tries to go towards the line, but Reddick has a little bit more speed, ends up beating him to the line for the win. And you know what? It's crazy considering how much we gushed over that Jordan brand paint scheme last week's show. So was that an omen or something?
We gushed over the paint scheme. And look, don't get me wrong. I was really bummed because of the big push for Brad. And I knew McDowell was going to do something like that. And I would have loved to have seen him not wreck, right? Because we hadn't really had the big one until then. And see them kind of race. But Mark, I don't know if you saw it, but seeing Jordan holding Tyler Reddick's boy, getting interviewed right after he takes the checker, that was something, I think we're all kind of, or Mark and I think are similar in age. You probably remember too, Sean, we grew up watching Michael, right? I mean,
yeah.
So to see Michael, the NBA guy, investing, and quite frankly, 23XI is a top tier team. They're not quite Joe Gibbs, but man, they are just as fast, right? And to see his brand on that car, to see him in the ownership, to see him holding Tyler Reddick's boy and, getting him all excited and cheering him on. If I wasn't going to get the win with Brad, I can't lie. That was the coolest story we have seen a long time in the NASCAR garage. And seeing that interview with Michael Jordan, you guys can go back and see it, check it out. It's well worth it. That was cool to watch. I can't lie.
Oh, for sure.
Reddick came out of nowhere too. It was
Yes.
it wasn't expected that he was going to obviously win that. So
once again, we talked about it before, 2,500, 2,200, 3,200. Those are the guys that seem to find a way to win for whatever reason. That's just the way things seem to work out. And I looked around and nobody was pushing Reddick anywhere, Mark, to your point. Nowhere. Not our competition, not us. I didn't see anybody on Reddick. So for the few people that held those Reddick tickets, congrats to you. You probably picked it because of the paint scheme, but it's acceptable, I guess, from my opinion. So I do like we did have some, we did push Ford all week, Sean. That was something we talked about on the podcast. Unfortunately, after qualifying, Ford's odds went from the middle group at plus 180 to the favorite at plus 130, I think it was. So here again, one thing I will say, I get it. It's nerve-wracking sometimes to place these bets midweek, but the soft line, especially at these big tracks, the soft lines are early in the week. If you're going to do something where you're going to take $10 and spread it across 5, 6, 7, 8 drivers, do it Thursday, do it before qualifying, get the longer odds. It'll pay off that way. But we had some great finishes from Noah Gragson, who finished third. Ricky Stenhouse, once again, another plate race where he finishes well fourth. Hey, we talked to Anthony Alfredo on here.
Yeah.
Sean, we did talk him up last week on the podcast. He had a nice finish in sixth. Todd Gilliland was a guy that we both kept hammering. He finished eighth. Hemrick, you were all over pushing him. He was ninth. And Harrison Burton, which we've been fading Harrison Burton, and I can't lie, I looked at it for this race, but I was like, I can't do it. And I didn't do it. But Harrison Burton rounded out the top 10.
Yeah, just couldn't do it with Harrison, especially when he's been having probably the worst season yet of his career. I mean, my gosh, it has been just a tragic year for him so far.
Fading Harrison, no matter where he has started, has been a winning strategy. Like there's no until this last weekend anyway. So there's no getting around that at all. We did have some unfortunate news. The worst accident we saw was when 6 or was it 6 or 7? There's 7 total, and Hocevar wasn't in the group. So there was 6 Toyotas all together. They all pitted together. This was going to be a fun strategy to see it play out. Like I was really excited to see the strategy play out. You had Brad Keselowski trying to push and drag everybody to stop them from saving fuel because they were already not going to save. They were going to come and pit anyway, right? That they were pushing the envelope. Toyota said, screw it. We're going to get together. We're going to go ahead and short pit. We're going to pit early. And then when all these clowns either run out of gas or need to pit, we're good to go. And we're going to get single file in a line. We're going to be fast enough to a group. We may not go a lap down. We may be able to catch the pack and just buy our time. Unfortunately, they screwed up in their small little grouping and wrecked half of the 6 cars there. And really, Erik Jones got by far the worst of it. And I will keep it short, Sean, because you and I talked about this. I'm irate. I'm very, very irate. And I'm getting tired of the folks telling me I don't know what the F I'm talking about, because I do know what the fuck I'm talking about. We are traveling slower speeds with this car. We have way less horsepower than we used to. This car is lighter. Velocity times mass equals momentum. Momentum is the energy that we're feeling when we're hit or in a wreck, okay? Where you shrink that momentum is how you slow down in the crash. Seems crazy, but 100th going to 200ths of a second, going from going to a complete stop, cuts that momentum in half, even though it's only 100th of a second, because that we're talking large values here, okay? This car is not safe enough, man. We have had 2 major safety adjustments since the launch of the car. We're not even 2 years into the car. Those safety adjustments happened 16 months in. Oh, well, no one else has hit the wall that hard like that. Not since senior. BS. I pulled up a video of 2019, just 2019 wrecks, okay? It wasn't just Daytona. The last 5 minutes of the clip was mostly Daytona, Talladega. We see 1 a year, 2 a year at these tracks. This is nothing new. A car gets turned and goes head into the wall. What is new is the amount of concussions and the amount of injuries we're seeing from guys that are kind of walking away from these crashes. We did not see this with the COT. We did not see this with the next gen. Yeah, we had a lot more races under those cars. We had some similar injuries. We didn't have this many injuries 2 years into the launch of the car. We know NASCAR won't add horsepower to the short track. Well, it's too costly. Teams say it. No, it's not. Oh, well, we can't get OEMs. The OEMs are making motors in other series that are producing much closer to 1,000 horsepower. So I'm not buying that. My theory, and I have off the record, I've talked to some folks, and basically I'm told you're not wrong. My theory, this car's not safe enough and they're not comfortable adding more horsepower even at short track. And I'm getting really sick and tired of people giving both NASCAR a pass. And honestly, I'm mad at Kevin Harvick. Kevin Harvick a few weeks ago made the comment, yeah, this car hits harder. And they asked him about it on air. Oh, NASCAR's done a great job. And he walked on broken glass around it. The sad thing is again, off the record, NASCAR has told the media and the folks in the garage, you talk negatively about this car and what's going on with NASCAR, we're yanking your hard card. For those who don't know what a hard card is, that's basically the pass that you get from NASCAR to get access to the garage and all that stuff. So if you're a media member, if you're a crew member, if you're a team member, your access, they're threatening to take it away. I compare this to the football beat writers, and Mark, you can probably touch on this a little bit. Football beat writers have long disappeared for the most part. They're mostly talking pieces for the teams nowadays. If you want to get information from the teams, you tell what the team wants you to tell. Doesn't matter if it's truthful or not. You tell what the team wants you to tell. That's not journalism. That's not getting anything done. That's not helping anyone. We're seeing the same thing in NASCAR. And I will not stop hitting home this car and the lack of safety till something is done. Unfortunately for NASCAR, I don't have a hard card. They can't yank it. Maybe our platform's not big enough yet, but gosh darn it, Sean, we're growing it. And I'm not opposed to when Fincy and Ray ask us again, I have no problem saying it on air. And if NASCAR has a problem with it, too bad. You know, Jeff has made the comment, people come after him because he speaks the truth. Well, NASCAR's getting away with it, and I'm tired of it. And they're not going to be satisfied until someone's paralyzed or dead, and I see no reason for it. None. Because the cost savings this car was supposed to bring, it ain't happening yet. We're 2 years in, and it's still not accomplishing what they want. What it's accomplished is made intermediate racing better. Oh, awesome. And you ruined short track racing, and you have made super speed racing even more dangerous. I'll stop there before it goes any further, but I am pissed. And NASCAR, get your shit together, man, because I tell you what, I'm not letting this go.
A rant pretty much worthy of the Rich Maletto name right there. Fantasy Bosco for you folks. But I will say though that I do think NASCAR does have to make a lot of adjustments towards this car in order to improve things. So hopefully they can get their stuff together and just fix it for the better. Hopefully they can still keep working on it because clearly they've got work to do. And I'm just going to leave it at that as we segue into the fact that this will lead right into the fact with Erik Jones being injured with a lower back vertebrae. He's going to be out this week at Dover. And instead, we're going to have Corey Heim, Truck Series driver, make his Cup Series debut in the number 43 car for Legacy Motor Club. So Erik Jones, he already released a video out on his social media pages saying that his injury is going to be week to week. He doesn't know when he's going to be back. What are your guys' thoughts on this injury news here with Erik Jones? I'll start with you, Mark.
Yeah, I mean, fire up Corey Heim for me. I'm looking at his price point. The odds line up. Like, we'll see how qualifiers go. Like at the end of the day, we have to look at where he's going to place at and everything else. But I'm kind of liking the tea leaves so far. So it sucks, obviously, for Erik Jones. I had him in my lineup on Sunday for what that's worth. But yeah, I mean, it's a tough conversation to have, like we were just talking about. But I think at the end of the day, got to move forward, man. Got more races this weekend. Got a full season ahead of us here. We got a lot of racing still to come this year. So that's going to be what are they going to do for the rest of the current season to make sure that no one does, like you said, get not only seriously injured, but to try to prevent some of these crazier crashes. I mean, it was just scary seeing it, right? At the end of the day, some of these are getting a little more violent than you would expect. So
I think you summed it up really well, Mark. Sean, I think he's going to be out 4, maybe 5 weeks. This is very similar to the Alex Bowman injury. Different accident, similar injury, compression fracture in the lower vertebrae. He was out for 4 weeks. Maybe it's a little longer. When they say week to week, football, Mark, when they say week to week, we pretty much assume a month to 6 weeks, right? So I got to figure it's somewhere in that ballpark. Look, you guys know I love Corey Heim. I brag about this guy in every article every week. If it's trucks or the overview article, I'm a big Corey Heim guy. He's only had one Xfinity race here. He didn't do all that well, but the car, I believe he lost an engine, if I remember correctly, in that race. Erik Jones has done well at this track. I'm going to touch on more of some of that with his owner as well. But Erik Jones has done well, so it's very unfortunate we don't get to see it. I kind of like Mark's thoughts. I did kind of look at Heim and that price point. For me, it's going to come down to practice speeds and qualifying, just because this car is kind of tricky to get used to, and he has 0 Cup experience. We saw it last year with Ty Gibbs. We already see how much a difference a year makes from Ty Gibbs having that year of experience with this car and how much better he looks now. We're seeing the same thing with Noah Gragson, who started out so horrible last year. But I think this is 4 to 5 weeks. I assume it'll be Heim the whole time. I don't know that, but Heim is a Toyota driver. If he looks like he's over his skis a little bit, maybe they go somewhere else. I kind of had hoped they were going to maybe throw Ryan Truex in the car for this weekend specifically. I'll touch on that a little bit later too. But yeah, 4 or 5 weeks sucks. And I think Mark summed it up well, because they are starting to look more ridiculous and violent.
But I just want to add one thing. Like you said it, he doesn't have the experience, which means there's not a lot of data for us to work off of, which is a good and bad thing in the sense that this is an ownership opportunity. It's a salary saver. So if this guy can come in and we can ride this storyline, I love riding storylines. I'm a sucker for them. I know it doesn't always work out. It's kind of anti-playing the odds, but there's something about it where riding a storyline with, some other, indicators that line up on this slate that I'm willing to take a chance on, especially in tournaments, finding a low ownership opportunity like that and also a salary saver it's unique.
This is perfect. This is perfect. Sorry, Sean. You can tee off on this in 1 second, but Mark, what you hit on. So one thing I have noticed when you've shared your lineups, there is always one driver that I'm always like, man, I don't know, because of track history, because of recent history, something like that. And you have seen something, and I've never critiqued or called it out or said anything. One, because it's freaking worked, and so I'm not gonna try to get in anyone's head just because I don't agree. But two, I've noticed that somewhere I need to make an adjustment, and you hit on something right there that sometimes I know I forget to think about. You're right. Because of the lack of info, it's more risky, but it's also much more contrarian. And if, we know we like what we've seen from Keim in the past at the other levels. If that does work, wow, do you have a huge leg up, because now you have a piece that, let's just say, is the top 7 scorer, okay? Top 6 score is probably a better example. You have a top 6 score that literally almost nobody else in the tournament has. That is a huge advantage. And Mark, I think that is an excellent call out. And you're right. The price point gives you some flexibility then, because his price is so low, especially for this upcoming week, like you said, where we can target some things like dominators. Mark, this is one of the reasons I wanted you on here, is exactly that type of stuff. Like I can see the wheels in my head turning like this. I get where you're coming from, and this makes a whole heck of a lot of sense. Sorry, Sean, go ahead, bud.
So just to add on to this, and this is going to add a few more points for liking Corey Heim this week, he's actually been the simulator driver over the past year or two for Toyota teams, including 2311 Racing and Legacy Motor Club from this year. He's also been hired as Legacy Motor Club's reserve driver. So if any of the drivers get injured, Heim is the first person that they're going to be calling to fill in every time. And that's also the case for 2311 as well, if any of their drivers get injured as well.
So we know at this point then, Heim is in the car until Jones is back. And if something happens at another Legacy car or 2311, he's the next guy in regardless.
Yeah, the only way that they're not going to call Heim in is if for some reason he can't do the race itself, in which case then they'll call somebody else in.
Well, like when we do the doubles, like, they're at Martinsville and they're at Kentucky, or they're at Texas, or we see it from time to time when they're, the trucks are somewhere else from Xfinity or Cup or something like that. Okay. I love that info there, Mark. That is exactly the type of stuff that I want to hear and dig into. So kudos.
You also have to feel a little uneasy with your lineup, right? Like, no matter what type of tournament it is, if you're not looking at it like, this thing could definitely fall apart quickly, then you're probably not different enough. So,
well, okay. Point 2, I'm not different enough. I always want my lineup to feel good, and that would explain why. I don't know how many times I've gone, man, I really like this lineup. I can't believe this didn't cash. So here again, like I said, I know every time I see your lineups, I'm like 95% there, and there's always this little bit of uneasiness. And now that I know kind of your thought process behind it, it's calculated. It's something you are trying to do. That's significant, Mark. I mean, this goes back to, we were talking off air before, but all of us were discussing how contest selection, how to build lineups, all these things aren't talked about enough, and that it's the actual process behind it. I mean, Mark, you're taking that same process and you're tweaking it. We talked about that. You tweak it from sport to sport, track to track. There's a lot of variables that you have to adjust along the way. But the fact of the matter is, at this point, I'm willing to say all your lineups leave you a little bit of uneasy feeling. All your lineups have a player or two, depending on the size of the lineups, that are, I'm not going to call them off the wall, because I don't think that's really fair, but they may not be the given targets that you would think it would exist, right? It may not be the matchup you think you want to target. It may be a player that it may not be a great matchup, but they're due, or other factors play into it. So, man, now you got me rethinking all Corey Heim this weekend, because, I mean, we all know I love Corey Heim. I'm pissed off he's not a full-time Xfinity driver. Like, I've said that already. So, all right.
Like we got to look at the how he qualifies. What practice looks like. I mean, there's a lot more that we still have to wait on here as well.
If he qualifies in the top 5, I'm probably fading him, right?
Oh yeah.
If his practice times are near the bottom, that doesn't necessarily mean I'll fade him, right? But I may not feel as good about it.
I don't know about that for this week. I don't like if he qualifies pretty high, I'm almost open to it.
Are you still? Just because of the contrarian aspect of it?
No, not even. I think that I think that where they're gonna finish versus where they start, the range of place differential I think is smaller for a track like this. So for example, if Corey Heim, his starting position is 13th and he can finish 8th at 5,800, like that allows me to then play maybe 3 other guys that could be first, second, and third.
That is massive. Mm-hmm. And here again, I tell you what, Mark, that is definitely contrary to what most people will tell you out there. They'll tell you someone like that, well, if he qualifies 13th, he could finish 18th. But I would argue, to your point, he still pays at $5,800.
Doesn't kill you. Yeah.
Right? Because, I mean, in 18th, as long as he finishes, if he qualifies inside the top 15 and finishes inside the top 20, no, it's not going to be the home run we want. But to your point, it's not going to kill you. And he's going to more than pay for his salary at $5,800. And to your point, he's going to be what? Less than 1% owned in most cases?
Yeah. And then you can fit in a top dominator type of guy or 2 of them and build out the rest of your lineup from there. But I'll take my chances in a single entry, 400 person, tournament field there, right? Like he's going to be super different in a field like that, where I might be literally the only person who plays him. So
I'm smelling what you're cooking, bro. And I'm loving it. So let me ask you this. Do you typically start with the value in your NASCAR lineups, or does it kind of just vary on the track, or do you have kind of a set process when you're going to kind of start your lineup build?
Yeah, for me, so I do like to look at your guys' articles because I don't know. Again, I know a little bit about NASCAR now that I've been watching it actively for a year, but I don't know everything about every track. So a lot of your content gives me a baseline of like what I can generally expect from this race. So then I'll take that and I'll run on over to the DraftKings Sportsbook or FanDuel Sportsbook or whatever sportsbook I'm looking at. I normally use DraftKings. I think their odds are a little bit sharper than FanDuel, quite honestly. Pinnacle, if you can get NASCAR odds over there, would probably be the sharpest, but I don't see very good lines over there for NASCAR specifically on a consistent basis. It's on a tangent there, but so I'll go over to the sportsbook. I'll look at the odds versus price point, and I'll say, okay, here are the guys that I like earlier in the week, and then I'll take a break. I'll wait for everyone to for their positions to come out. Once I know where everyone's actually racing, then I'll re-examine the sports book. I'll re-examine their price points, and I'll look at place differential opportunity, and then determine, what type of race this is. Is this a race where I think a guy can go from 35th to 1st? I feel like this week is a tougher week to do something like that. So I'm not going to prioritize place differential as much as laps led and fastest laps recorded. All right. So when I look at it that way, I need to look at the odds and I need to look at the price points and say, how can I build a lineup where I can maybe throw in 2 to 3 dominators and then, fill out the rest of my lineup with high probability guys that can, get me the most points possible per price point. So I look at this week and I say, I'm going to prioritize guys that finish at the top, and I'm going to prioritize guys that maybe just, have a good price point where they only move up 5 or 6 spots, right? Because a lot of them, in my opinion, from what I've read and seen so far, it sounds like to me, once they get into the top 10, they want to just kind of stay there, and they're going to conservatively try and lock in that spot for the Cup Series in general. So I'm looking at it like if I see a low salary saver like Corey Heim or even John Hunter Nemechek, for example, like guys like that, if they're in the teens, and they can somehow, like, if I can get like some guys at like 17, 19, and they move their way up into like the 10th, 11th, and 12th spot, or the 8th, 9th, and 10th, I'm good with it, because then I can fit in like Kyle Larson or Martin Truex or, you know, whoever at the top there that I think can record a lot of laps led and fastest laps.
Which this is a track for that,
Yeah.
because we're going to do 400 laps this weekend. Pretty sure it's 400 laps.
Yeah, it is
400
going to be
miles.
400.
Yeah, 400 laps, because it's a mile track. And you're right. This isn't as bad to come from the back as it was Bristol or Martinsville, but you're spot on because of the high speed, because it is somewhat shorter being a mile. You're right. A lot of these guys, we're not going to see, this isn't Dega where you're going to see someone go from 30th to 10th like that. It could happen. We may have one or two that do, but it's going to take strategy. It's going to take things falling the right way. This isn't, you know, if we were at a Texas, if we were at a Kansas, if we're at a Charlotte, yeah, I think those things are a much more likely scenario. And I think your breakdown of it is spot on. And honestly, Mark, at least for me on the overview article, that is exactly the stuff I'm trying to supply is, hey, these are the things we want to look at these tracks. When we go to Bristol, we go to Martinsville, you have to find those dominators. Don't go chasing the place differentials. When you're at Daytona and Talladega, let's go chase those place differentials and forget about dominator. When we're at the road courses, that's probably the most difficult, I would argue, because the dominator points are so puny. We only have 68 laps, for example, or 47 laps or whatever it is. So you don't have a lot of points to get there. At the same time, yeah, we've seen guys go from 30th to 10th, but that's not real common either, right? Like typically where they qualify is kind of where they run. So, Mark, I think that's a spot on and a great approach that, quite frankly, I'm going to start tweaking a little bit. Not like tweaking out, but tweaking my process a little bit here, because I think that is you summed it up perfectly there. Sean, I don't mean to talk over you here, but
Nah, it's important in order to get
man.
this out there, so, and it fits the narrative, especially since we're talking about Heim being probably the biggest story regarding the Cup Series race this weekend. It's something that we do have to keep in mind, and it all just factors back into the strategy of it all. And this is why it pays in order to pay attention towards different news items like this as well. So that's the big one we got to hit on this week there. But there are a few other smaller announcements that we're going to kind of go through real quick here too, regarding the Truck Series in particular. The Truck Series is not racing this week, but the Truck Series will be back next week. And some of these announcements do affect that race here. So let's quickly go through them here. Starting with the fact that Supercars driver Cam Waters will have his next truck start at Kansas. He's driving for Thor Sport once again. So quick thoughts on this there, Rich and Mark?
Yay for they've been going through all sorts of different drivers on that number one car or truck. I'm excited because Brett Moffitt's, he flashes, he disappears. I think people forget that he was the 2018 truck champion.
We're talking about Cam Waters here, not
my
Brett
bad.
Moffitt yet. We're getting ahead of ourselves.
I am. Supercars, Cam Waters. Look, I think we're going to see more and more people pulling supercar drivers. After the SVG deal, they are very similar to the IMSA cars. It's very similar to the IMSA series. This next-gen car is kind of based off that IMSA car. So I think, and if I remember correctly, was it Cam that ran already a race this year? And did, I mean, he was decent, right? If I remember correctly, I'll have to look it up. If Mark wants to give his thoughts, I'll look it up.
This, so I haven't been following Truck Series as much, but is this the Australian guy?
So SVG is the Australian guy, Shane Van Gisbergen. And he's not running trucks. Nope. But this guy, Cam Waters, is coming from that same series.
Okay, got it. All right. So that's what I'm confusing there. Yeah, I really don't have a whole lot on him. So Truck Series is one I'm catching up on a bit here on my end.
So
I tell you what, Mark. Oh, go ahead, Sean.
I was just going to say, for perspective, he ran one race earlier in the month, actually, at Martinsville, where he drove the 66 truck. He ended up finishing 30th after getting involved in an accident, but he was running about top 15 until that point.
I was to say, if I remember correctly, though, he was running near the front or towards the front, and you summed that up well, Sean. I will say this, Mark. I don't know if it's worthwhile to bet a lot on trucks in DFS, but I will say this. If you want an edge, you know how you talked about, being in the front office and kind of seeing the process and learning some of these players and all that. finding these guys in even ARCA. I mean, if you really want to get deep, Mark, we can talk ARCA sometime and all that. I mean, we're talking like less than single A Major League Baseball type level.
Hey, we need some contests for it. Why not?
Right. But my point being is Corey Himes have been on our radar because of the Truck Series. Carson Hocevar on the radar because of the Truck Series. Zane Smith on the radar because of the Truck Series. Jesse Love skipped all that, right? But he did perform in a couple of races. Sammy Smith, kind of the same boat. What I'm getting at is it's something fun to kind of dabble in once in a while because that's where the youth is and the next generation, so to speak, is coming up. So talk about finding an edge at times. I feel like we can be on the early guys earlier or on the younger guys earlier because we have some of that knowledge. So I wouldn't go too deep into it. That's what the geeks and degenerates like me that grew up around racing all the time do. I'll have you covered on that. But yeah, that's the Truck Series getting into weeds, Mark. I mean, we're talking, just to put it in perspective, we have multiple drivers that can't drive all the tracks because they're not old enough.
Yeah.
I'm serious. Like that's true. That's true, So all right. Well, can we talk about Moffitt then, since I buried the lead on that or jumped the gun here, Sean?
Yeah, so Brett Moffitt, he's returning to the Truck Series with Tricon Garage in the #1 truck for multiple races. Those other races haven't been listed yet, other than Kansas in May. And Seth Smith, who crew chief for Tony Breidinger before in a few races, will be Moffitt's crew chief during these races. So quick thoughts there.
Hey, I think people that's what I was saying before. I think people forget he was the 2018 truck champion. This is the top truck team. Maybe we see that one truck running up front again, man. Because they've had a bunch of youth and a bunch of unproven cut their teeth types, greenhorns. Moffitt's not it. And Moffitt has flashed even in some meh equipment over the last couple of years. I don't know, man. I'm getting kind of like Ron Hornaday, Jack Sprague, Ted Musgrave vibes here. Do you know what I'm saying? Which Mark's probably like, what thing? Yeah, I would say Mark's probably looking at me like I'm crazy. Long story short, back in the old days, the Truck Series was a bunch of youth and a bunch of old farts. The old farts made it fun. That was the Ron Hornadays and the Ted Musgraves and Jack Spragues of the world. So, yeah, I think it's a good thing. I think adding some veteran leadership to that team is something that's desperately needed. They have been way too young across the board on all 4 trucks.
Oh, for sure. It's going to be very interesting because other than Jack Hawksworth over there at Coda, they haven't had a lot of drivers that come from, like, say, outside of NASCAR or just proven veterans like this. It's going to be very interesting to see.
Agreed.
So we have one more Truck Series announcement that we're going to go through real quick here, and that's Connor Mosak. He announces 5 starts with Spire Motorsports in that #7 truck overall there. He's going to be racing at Kansas starting next week, Charlotte next month, Pocono in July, Kansas again in September, and Homestead in October. Let's give us your quick synopsis there, Rich.
I am very curious to see how this plays out. He has never really had an opportunity and decent equipment to run. I mean, we've seen him in some Xfinity races. We've only seen him in a handful of truck races. And this goes back to, I hate when they force these guys up into these other series before they get to drive a little bit. Most of the experience we've seen from Mosek's been in Xfinity. He's had a couple of decent finishes, mostly on the road courses. Portland was 8th. Watkins Glen was 5th. Outside that, he's been okay. It's a very interesting hire, in my opinion, for Spire. They've been very specific about, like, they told Kyle Busch which races he could do. They've been very specific about who they're putting in these trucks and at what tracks. And I got to believe they're doing it from a technical standpoint as far as, hey, we know he has some road course experience. He's been good on road courses. This is a way to upgrade our road course program. We know Kyle is good at all these tracks. We're struggling at these tracks specifically. Let's put Kyle in these trucks for those races. Maybe we can find something that we're missing in the setup, missing in the truck. So overall, I don't know that I'm like super like stoked and like, oh, we got one. But you've got to take note when anybody steps into the #1 Tricon or any of the other Tricon trucks, any of the Spire trucks right now that was formerly Kyle Busch, any of the alliances like with Rev and so on, You've heard me talk about Raja. That's the same team there at Spire. So very curious to kind of see it work out here.
All right. That's very interesting to make a note of. We're going to hit one more quick item here, and we're going to talk about the fact, could Kroger's sponsorship be moving to Joe Gibbs Racing? There's been a bunch of rumors coming out saying that as part of a big ownership shakeup at JTG Daugherty Racing, right now they field the number 47 car in the Cup Series for Ricky Stenhouse Jr. If Tad Gestecker, one of the owners there, is going to be moving as maybe a potential part owner of Joe Gibbs Racing. Now, for context, he's also been helping Joe Gibbs with sponsorship since about 2 years ago in 2022. So this will be very interesting to see. But could we perhaps be seeing a closure of JTG Daugherty Racing, or could somebody else swoop in order to make this team into a new one?
I'm concerned, Sean. I'm concerned. And the reason I'm concerned is we've already heard the rumors on Stuart Haas scaling back, losing a charter, that sort of stuff. We've already heard that there is nowhere close to an agreement on expanding the charters, keeping the charters, shutting down the charters, whatever they want to do with the charters. We haven't heard anything on the media money as far as the split with the teams. That's got to be negotiated. I'm having a hard time saying things are looking rosy when I see something like, holy crap, do we see JTG Daugherty close? Do we see Stuart Haas go down to 3 cars? Now, we heard people say, well, but Spire will add one. Rick Ware will add one. 2311 will add one. Trackhouse will add one. Cool. And if that's what happens, great. I don't want to see – I've known too many people in those garage areas, and actually a new ruling came out on non-competes, which is kind of interesting to NASCAR. I don't want to get into that now, but they leave those teams. They can't go other places. This is going to be something to watch, and I think it's more indicative of the sport overall.
Yeah, very interesting overall to see as it is. This is something that we're going to be having to follow all throughout the summer, because this is when silly season really starts to ramp up there. So something to keep in mind. But other than that rumor, let's get into some paint schemes there, Rich. Let's talk some what we'll be seeing on the track this week.
I want Mark's paint schemes first. And I'm a big fan of the first one he listed here. All right. One, I like their product. People don't even know they have restaurants that you can go to that are fast food. You know my thing on the whole color thing, right? So I want to have Mark launch us here with his.
All right, Mark, get on into it. What's your first choice here?
Yeah, I went with Todd Gilliland. So with the A&W All-American Food Truck. So I don't know, man. I like the root beer look. I like it's clean too. It's not too busy. So for me, I'm enjoying the colors. It reminds me a little bit of my childhood as well. And I think seeing this car, if this car can thrive, it'll be fun to watch a nice, clean, crisp car take the lead on the pack.
I'm with you. It's very clean. And I like how they did the number and the way the colors did it. They did a really good job with this, in my opinion.
Oh, yeah, I'm a fan of this one, too. This was definitely within some of the paint schemes I was considering for some of my own choices there as well. The number pops. I love the fact that Mark said it had like a nice little root beer inspired look, because that's exactly what I'm thinking of when I see this scheme here. It's just very clean, very simple, but very effective. Mark, how about we get into your second choice here next? What do you got? What else do you got?
Yeah, the second one is John Hunter Nemechek's car. So so this one's a little bit busier. White, the white in the back, a little bit of party, all business in the front with the black. So I would say a little bit edgier too. What I like about this car is I could actually envision this car having a great day and coinciding with the paint scheme. So I'm really looking forward to seeing some John Hunter Nemechek this weekend.
I like the approach that you're taking here with this, Mark, having the paint schemes not just look good, but show that they are good on track there. That's a good way to approach it overall. Something I did want to point out about the paint scheme, though, too, is that it's also very similar to one of his other paint schemes, the Safeway paint scheme that he ran earlier in the year. has the same amount of sponsorship and back, similar color scheme. But I think the main difference here is that it's going to feature the Acme logo on the hood, similar to his paint scheme featured here from his 2022 Xfinity Series car when he drove in Xfinity part-time for JGR. So just to give a little bit of perspective of what we can see on the track, this is about an idea of what we can expect. What do you think, Rich?
You know what jumps out to me, and you guys are going to laugh at me? It's the sponsorship. Menards has a very unique model, and I wrote to NASCAR suggesting that they get the teams to do it. And I can talk to you guys off air specifically what their model is. I had a friend that worked there at Menards for part of the race team thing and how they go about the sponsorship. But if you notice, the hood on the Menards car constantly changes. There's always a Menards on there, but the hood always changes. At JTG Doherty, we saw that with Kroger. Kroger would be on the hood, but a lot of their vendors, you would notice, whether it be a Dial or a Minute Maid or something, would be all over the back. Clorox was real common, all over the back of the car. We see this here, different hood, similar paint scheme, and we got all those associate sponsors, which I agree, it's a little busier, Mark, but it's done pretty well with that white, right? You can see each of the individual logos. They did a pretty good job. I guess what I'm getting at is I'm thinking the sponsorship model might be changing a little bit. The fact that we're talking about a Kroger who does something very similar to this going to Joe Gibbs, we never saw big teams doing this. This was always something smaller teams did. And I'm just wondering if we're going to see a lot more of this. It really reminds me, what they're doing here reminds me a lot of what we've seen with Menards in the past.
Oh yeah, for sure. I think that's something that we got to keep our eye on. We've seen, you mentioned it there with JTG Doherty with the Kroger schemes, and then we've seeing it here. Yeah, it could be a trend to watch for. But you know what? Speaking of paint schemes, I'm going to go on into my paint schemes next, and I'm going to talk about a paint scheme for a driver that should be racing this week but is not due to injury. We're going to go with the Erik Jones, Corey Heim scheme with the STP Petty throwback here for this weekend with Dollar Tree and STP. So this is a really, really cool looking car. They just announced that they're doing it this week. A really cool nod to Petty's 75, the 75th anniversary of Petty. So there you go. It's classic. What can I say?
Mark, I'm sold on Heim now. I'm all in. It's
the old school look. It's the storyline. There's a lot going for him this weekend.
So, you mentioned storylines earlier, Mark, and I wanted to touch on this. There's a guy, he's a professional poker player. We talk NASCAR, met him on Twitter, that sort of stuff. And he and I go back and forth with bets. We bet storylines in NASCAR. Betting storylines, and I don't know how it works in other sports as much. Betting storylines in NASCAR works, Mark. So when you said that, I know you're like, yeah, it's kind of weird. No, man. I think it's a brilliant strategy. And I get it. It's just a paint scheme, but holy crap. We haven't seen a card with the STP sponsorship and this color scheme. Sean, it's got to have been. I mean, we've done the paint schemes without STP on the car, but it's got to be 5, 6, 7 years since we've seen something comparable.
I want to say that maybe we may have seen STP come back at least during one of the throwback weekend races at Darlington. But other than that, in regular races, no.
See, and I thought the Darlington ones were throwbacks of other sponsors. Maybe they were. I'll have to go back and look. But hat tip to this paint scheme, man. And I'm with you on storylines, Mark. Giddy up. Let's go.
Yeah, just imagine you're making your first start in the Cup Series and you're driving probably the most famous 43 number in Petty Blue. With STP.
He is so lucky, man. He's the type of guy that probably would notice and appreciate it. This has gone from interesting to a weird storyline because it is his first start. 75th edition anniversary. Wow. All right.
Yeah, crazy stuff. But getting on and moving on to my next pick, I'm going to have Noah Gragson with a new sponsor, MillerTech, on this week for that number 10 Stewart-Haas Racing Ford. I really like how this one looks in particular. You have the mixture of colors. You have white, black, blue, and yellow. I love the Thunderbolts on the side, and the fact that this car overall, for a battery company, this is exactly how I'd want a car to look. It just looks electric. It looks fast. I love it, guys.
I was waiting for that because I saw the photo. I'm like, oh, I know why Sean loves this. It looks fast.
I love fast-looking cars. What can I
You
say?
do, man. You do. What do you think, Mark?
It's got that Lightning McQueen look. Reminds
Right?
me of watching cars with my 3-year-old. So I mean, Denny Hamlin fits that persona too. So
Oh,
Well,
yeah.
Noah
I'm
or
sorry,
Denny.
no Gregson. No
He
Dre-
does. He
After
does fit.
last week. After last week.
Well, but I was going to say, I mean, you know how Noah lost his ride last year, right?
No.
Oh, just long story short, he liked a post that people found as distasteful and on Twitter,
Oh.
and it led to him.
I do remember this now. Yeah.
And he is very open to speak his mind. So, Mark, you can say I call Brock Purdy and Chase Purdy the same all the time, man. And one's a race car driver and one's a football player. So I'm not going to judge. I think you're spot on with his personality fitting this. You're exactly right, Mark.
Speaking of Denny Hamlin, I believe he's one of the choices that we're going to discuss this week. Isn't that right there, Rich?
That would be correct. Let's throw it up there.
Yeah, here we go. We have, the new Mavis tire scheme. Mavis Tires and Brakes. Hamlin's been running with them since about last year. He already had another scheme that he's already been running this year, but they unveiled this brand new paint scheme variant this week that they're going to be running at Dover there. Tell us your thoughts on this, Rich.
This was more of a pick because I thought it was, I don't want to say, it's fun and kind of goofy. Like it's very, you can't miss what it is, right? The sponsor did a great job of making sure you know what they are and what they're about, right? But it very much reminds me of the Hanna-Barbera paint schemes of back in the day. And you guys may or may not even remember those, but it's been so old school. And back then I used to dog those paint schemes, but now looking back, it's like, they were kind of fun. This reminds me a lot of those.
Oh, yeah. So, Mark, what do you think of this scheme?
I mean, I think it's memorable. I think, like you said, they did a good job of popping out here. I personally, I could go without it. I've seen cooler cars on Denny Hamlin's side. So, but at the same time, like you said, I do think it pops and it's different. It's unique. So that's the upside here.
So what do you guys think? Do you guys like this scheme better, or do you like the scheme he's been running all year, which is this better?
I like this way better.
Yeah.
This is way better for me. This is more, if I was going to paint a car, that's how I would paint a car.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I'm definitely more of a fan of this, and I especially love the tire tread design on the side there, too. So, love it there.
Yeah. This looks really sharp to me. Like I said, the other one, it did. And Mark, if you haven't seen it, I'll get you some photos. It is different color schemes, but like I said, it just has that same cartoonish art kind of look to it, if that makes sense.
It's like you said, it's different. It's something unique. So I think that's the appeal.
As a sponsor, that's what I want. As a driver,
He doesn't care if he wins, though. So
right. It's the same sponsor. He's got to say their name regardless how the car's painted.
Although he stopped saying his famous,
I know
his famous phrase there.
You know why? Your favorite driver.
Yeah. Do you know why he stopped saying that?
No, I didn't see that.
His dad called him and said, "Stop saying that.
Yeah.
You were raised better than that." Dead serious.
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
His dad wants to see him win the whole thing.
That was, if you guys do get a chance, they did do a good job. Is that on Netflix?
Are you talking about
I think
Netflix
that was
doc?
think it was in the documentary.
Yeah, a documentary because they followed around Hamlin, and his dad's a trip, man. And they show you the phone call his dad makes. It's freaking hilarious. You were raised better than that.
Oh, man. Speaking of Denny Hamlin, let's talk about his team with this next one and talk about Bubba Wallace with the Xfinity and U.S. Air Force scheme here.
I love this one. Okay. The other one was more unique, kind of fun, gave me a little bit of nostalgia. I love this one because it's like the paint scheme from the old Warthogs. the airplanes. And it's Air Force is the sponsor. For the most part, it's very simple. The only busy, goofy thing about it's the crunch mouth at the front of it. But again, like I said, that's a spinoff of what. Right. So, game on. I think this looks sexy, personally.
This one was my favorite. I agree. It's like it's not too busy. It's pretty cool looking. It's got some cool colors. Everything about it ties into the overall sponsorship. So I love it.
Yeah, it's a really cool looking scheme. We've seen Bubba Wallace run with the Air Force paint schemes before. They did another similar one, I want to say, like a year or two ago, where they had the Air Force on and they based it on another one of the plane designs. But this one looks especially really cool, and I'm a big fan of it as well. And Xfinity is on board in order to be an associate sponsor this time, so that rounds out some of the space very nicely, too.
Yeah, I think we're all in agreement. This is a good one.
All right. That'll do it with our paint scheme spotlight of the week. So let's get on into actually talking about the Dover race. Let's preview Dover. So let's go forth and talk about the fact that this is going to be a race on concrete. It's going to be using the 1.5 mile intermediate rules package, just like Bristol. Tire wear is going to be a concern. Ultimately, this could be a very dominator-focused race, especially with how hard it can be to pass at this track. So, yeah, those are a few of the big points that we need to keep in mind for this week. Anything else that you guys want to elaborate on with this?
I think Mark kind of summarized it very well. For a guy that says he doesn't watch a lot of NASCAR, I think he was spot on. Dominators are going to be key. We have a lot of laps, so you're going to have a lot of laps led, a lot of fastest laps. Those points are going to add up in a hurry. It is a self-cleaning track, which means when someone gets in trouble, they go right down the track. If there's other cars in the way, they take them out with them. So it is a little risky from that standpoint. I am in the process, if you guys want to discuss a little bit, I'm in the process of looking up the tire compound and the tire package for this weekend. I am curious where they ran this tire last year and if it is the same tire that we ran at Bristol. I think everybody's still kind of confused why the fall tire at Bristol didn't hold up the same, since it's the same tire, didn't hold up as well as in the spring. So I'm really curious to see what they do for the tire package this weekend at Dover.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting.
I thought, a lot of the comparisons to Bristol is catching my eye, and I'm trying to figure out if we could see a similar play out. The biggest thing that stood out to me, if you're comparing the two, is are we going to see as many drivers get lapped as we saw at Bristol? I mean, I think there was only five drivers on the lead lap when that race finished. So is it going to be something similar to that? Because if so, I'm going to be more hesitant to go after these guys that are starting 33rd or 25th or something like that, because it's going to kill their opportunity to move up and the upside that they might have.
That is correct there, Mark. Only 5 drivers finished on the lead lap in the Bristol race earlier this year. And just to go back to the comparisons, remember, the intermediate rules package was also used at Bristol and is being used at Dover this week.
And to your point, Mark, we won't see. So first of all, even 5 cars being on the lead lap at Bristol was kind of weird. You usually see a little bit more. The excess tire wear changed that race a little more than we normally have. We don't normally have 54 different lap leaders, right? Usually, even old school Bristol going back to the 2010s, 12, 15 cars on the lead lap was kind of common. We shouldn't see as many cars go a lap down here at Dover simply because it is a little bit longer, but we are going to see some of that. In fact, I can pull that up. I was just looking. I was trying to see if they would tell us. I got the compounds for the tires, and there's a whole write-up on how concrete is more difficult to deal with. Okay, this specific tire combination is unique to Dover. So this is both the left and right side tire features are the same compounds and construction that the Cup teams ran last year at Dover. So this is the exact same tire that ran at Dover last year. Let me just take a look real quick. I believe last year's Dover race, I want to say we had 20 cars on the lead lap, but I'm shooting from the hip, guys. I have to look that up.
Okay.
But-
Last year, yeah, you were correct. Actually, on the dot, 12 cars exactly in last year's race.
Oh, really? 12 cars with
you said.
12. Yeah, 12, not 20. I said I thought it was around 20, so 12.
Oh,
So honestly, it is right in line with Bristol then there, Mark, to your point.
Yeah, it just makes me that type of information makes me think that I'd rather go cheap on a guy that starts 20th versus cheap on a guy that starts 30th.
Well, to your point, just for some shits and giggles looking at last year's races, starting position, 17th to first, 14th to second, third for third, 8th for fourth, 13th for fifth, second and sixth, 7th and 7th. We don't see a lot of big jumpers. To your point, 23rd to 10 is a big jump. 28 to 12 is a big jump. 30 to 17, 29 to 18. To your point, Mark, we're only moving up 10, 12, 13 spots. That's it.
Yeah.
And that's the big movers. Those are the big ones. And there's only a handful of them.
And I mean, how many people in the field do you think are going to go after these cheap guys that are starting 30th? Do you think more are going to go after the guys that are starting 30th or going after the guys that are starting like 17th?
For sure, the guy starting 30th. You hit the nail on the head earlier in the show. You're spot on. So if we want to be contrarian, well, I was going to say, well, let me ask you this, Mark. Do you think it's reasonable to say going contrarian at the value picks is the way to play it, not being contrarian at the top value picks?
So I'm the opposite in football. Football, I will always go chalk with my value picks and then different on the expensive plays. NASCAR, I think it's just more dependent upon these types of indicators here. I think it depends on the track. There's a lot more. There's just as many variables as football, but I think that the range of outcomes is even wider in NASCAR. So for me, I don't think there is a right answer with that. I think it's race dependent.
That makes sense.
And because also think about this, we're probably looking at 3 dominators in our lineups for this weekend. So everyone's going to overlap up there. There's not going to be a whole lot of guys that are different at the top. So I think you have to get different at the bottom. And I think a lot of people are going to probably go more 2 dominators and then fit in because there's a lot of 8K options. So they're going to want to fit in those 8K guys and then not willing to pay all the way down to a Heim or a Hunter Nemechek or someone like that. Or dare I say, Harrison Burton at 5,100.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
And you know what, Sean? This is one of those. Mark will go in, share the lineup, and I'll look at it and be like, Harrison Burton. And then I'm not going to say nothing. I'm going to go about my own day. I'm going to watch the race. And then I'm going to go and check my lineups and see, I broke even or I'm down my $5 or something. And I'm going to go into Discord and I'm going to see Mark post a screenshot of a $5,000 win and look and see Harrison Burton in the lineup. And I'm going to go, this is why I kept my mouth shut. And I need to talk to Mark on why he decided to go that route when I'm fading the guy. Because that's, and again, and I'll tell you what, Mark, I don't know if you've ever seen our podcast before. Not a big deal, but I made a comment a few weeks ago that I've had to change my type of thinking for DFS. I have always been, I know my shit. I know who's going to finish well. Great. And I'm usually really close. I mean, there's been times I've had called 5 of the top 7, right? I mean, that's pretty accurate, but it's not paying off. And part of the reason it's not paying off is I'm not watching the points. To your point that you brought up, starting 20th, nobody's on him, so it's a contrarian play. Some people say that, well, that's risky. Do I? Because I joke and say in NASCAR, if you want to cash consistently, be chalk on 4 to 5 guys and go contrarian. But you absolutely have to hit on those 1 or 2 contrarian guys.
Yeah,
you have to. There's no way around it. You can get away with all the other crap with the chalk, but if your contrarian guys don't hit, you're done. That's just the way it is. So I think people, including myself, shy away because it's risky, right? But to your point, the only way you're going to win is you've got to find a way to differentiate, and you've got to be willing to take that risk and make it a calculated risk, right? Like you guys always talk about football, don't buy the bad chalk. And it has taken me quite a while to learn and understand what bad chalk is, right? In racing, I don't know that we really have bad chalk because it's not bad till somebody wrecks. And you don't really know what that is, right? And so you got to your point, you're right, Mark. Everybody's going to go ahead and be like, well, I can pick this guy in 30th. All I need him to do is get 22nd, 25th. And hey, I did fine. Well, you did do fine. But someone who was willing to gamble on Daniel Hemrick starting 20th and taking his 18th or 17th place finish and being satisfied with it because the points more than pay for the salary, that's the way to build a winning lineup. It's a different thought process, at least for me. Points. Where can I find points per dollar? I want the most points for the least amount of dollars, right? And I think that's what you're kind of hitting on. And frankly, Mark, you're pretty savvy at knowing when to take those risks and not. And it shows up. It really does.
And it doesn't always hit, but NASCAR DFS for me is completely all or nothing. Like if I'm going to cash, I hope I cash big. Otherwise, there's a good chance I'm not in the green at all. But I will say, looking at your lineups throughout the race, the one benefit or advantage to doing something like that is you get to see what the big swings look like. You get to see some of the contrarian lineups out there as the race is going. So you can say, okay, when this type of event happens, that benefits this type of driver, right? Because now this lineup that was made just shot all the way up to the top because, so-and-so gets penalties ever so frequently, and that benefits this other team. I don't know. I'm just throwing out a random illustration, but
no, that's a great example. Mark Truex has had that happen where he's chalky, whatever, tire penalty, too many men over the wall. Like we historically know there's certain teams that struggle, Mark. So I think that's a fantastic example. And Mark, this has been very, very helpful, quite frankly, to pick your brain on some of this because this is I have struggled at spots with DFS, and it's gotten a lot better this year because I've tried to develop some of these things. But it's one thing to look at bets, and we're trying to pick winners. We know what that is, right? Either you're a top 5, you're a top 10, whatever. When it goes to DFS, there's way more that goes into the points. Laps led, fastest laps, place differential, finishing position. A lot of those things we don't know. Maybe we're good at finding the finishing position, but that's only 1/5 of all the parts that go to it, right? So I think being contrarian and know where to be contrarian. And Mark, quite frankly, it is an attitude, right? Like you just said, I'm all or nothing. I want my lineup to cash big and win big. And if it doesn't, I'm not happy, but that's the risk I'm taking. I'm building lineups that either I'm hitting home runs on or I'm not. I'm striking out at home plate, and it is what it is. I give it my all. So I really appreciate that approach. And now I'm starting to understand your lineups, like when I see them, like how you're going about forming them. And you've also got me second guessing if I should be watching my lineups at this point.
Oh.
I mean, I think the argument to not watch it is just as good as the argument to watch it, but maybe even do it for a truck series. Maybe test that out doing truck series or something like that and just seeing how it kind of plays out that way. I feel like I have learned by watching how the slate formulates as the race goes on, especially crashes too. Good and bad. Sometimes crashes are, give you a great leverage opportunity.
It's just all the variables at play that can just swing a race in a matter of seconds.
Yeah. And that's also very frustrating because I was winning a lot of money. I think it was 3 weekends ago, and it went all the way on the final lap. I forget which race this was, but
I bet I know which one it was because I remember watching, and a whole bunch of people were really excited, and we got 2 laps to go, caution that came out because the car, it was John Hunter Nemechek. It was at Richmond. He was getting lapped by who was it? Martin Truex. Martin Truex had just gone around him and lapped him, and he cut a tire, and it caused a last lap caution. And we had Denny Hamlin pit, so he went from like second to 15th or some shit like that. And then we had the whole, or was that, maybe that's not the one? No, because that was the race. Richmond was the race.
You're talking about Martinsville.
I'm getting Martinsville and Richmond confused here. I would say Richmond's where we had the last second restart because of Kyle Larson and Bubba Wallace, their whole fiasco, or I think it was Kyle Larson. And then Denny Hamlin jumped to the restart, but Martinsville is when we had the last lap one with the tire going down. Yeah. Sometimes they blend together. I apologize.
Oh, yeah, guys. Definitely.
You'd be surprised what I can pull out and remember, but then I start mixing 2 events together and I have to go back and look. But I distinctly remember a few weeks ago, Mark, getting that caution with like 2 laps to go. And luckily I don't sit at my TV with things I can throw, or sit in my chair with things I can throw at the TV, because there have been many days that I have wanted to throw things at the TV when that happens. I feel your pain.
Oh, yeah.
Relatable.
So I think we've covered pretty much kind of the nuts and bolts of Dover. I tell you what, Mark, do you have any specific questions or thoughts or concerns regarding Dover? Other things you want to pick our brain about that maybe you don't know about Dover, anything like that?
I just think the biggest thing here for me is I'm really going to strive towards trying to get every single one of my drivers in the top 10. If that's the mindset I take and then I formulate my lineup from there, I think I'm in the wheelhouse of the type of build that I want to put together.
Okay.
So getting everyone to try and finish in the top 10, and how realistic is it, for a guy that starts 18th? And I would suspect you guys would agree that's realistic, but I think that's stretching it, right? Like, I don't think more than a 10 spot differential is going to be reasonable to expect out of anyone in your lineups this weekend.
I actually think getting 5 of your 6 in the top 10 would be a big win.
Yes, I have to agree with that too. Just because
I think. Go ahead, Sean.
The way that this track goes, and the way that unless a driver ends up qualifying deep in the field, where the equipment is at least going to carry them to the top 20, generally this is not the sort of track where you're going to be expecting too much movement really within that whole mid part of the pack, especially when you factor in the fact that this track is only a mile long. It's not Bristol where drivers are going to go a lap down very quickly, but drivers are still going to end up going a lap down, and traffic is going to come into play. And just with the way that these cars are made, it's hard in order to pass without moving a driver up. But with the way that the aero package is, air is just going to be in the way and make things harder for these drivers to get around.
But, Mark, I think is spot on when he said when these drivers get into the top 10, especially here at a place like Dover, they're going to find a way to hold it. They'll use pit strategy to get to that point, and then they're going to try to find a way to hold it. I guess where I was coming from is I love the idea of using someone like a Heim or a Harrison Burton. I just don't know that top 10 is realistic, but if they start 18th, 13th is realistic, 15th is realistic. And that's where I was saying, I think if we can build where 5 out of the 6 are top 10, and that 6th driver is somewhere in that 15th-ish range, that's a winner, Mark. That's absolutely a winner for you. So
I agree.
Spot on. And Sean's right. At Bristol, we'll start seeing cars go a lap down somewhere between laps 12 to 20, depending on the pace. Here, it's going to be somewhere around 27, 28 laps in that we'll start to see guys go a lap down, somewhere in that ballpark. And then it's going to come down to how many cautions. When I was just looking, we had 12 guys on the lead lap. There was another group of 8, I think, that was 1 lap down. And then you started getting to 2 laps down. And see, this is where it gets frustrating, where I don't want to watch is we see John Hunter Nemechek, who looked decent. He came in, they had a bad pit stop under green flag. So now he's 2 laps down because it's a short track, right?
Yeah.
How does he get the 2 laps back? Here he had a top 10 car speed-wise, but now he's 2 laps down because of, speeding on pit lane. They didn't get the lug on right, something like that. And to your point, Mark, that is where I think you're spot on with the range of outcomes. In the drop of a hat, you could go from an expectation of a top 10 finish to we just need to get this thing inside less than 1 lap down. Like now the whole goal is we want to be not 2 laps down. We want to be 1 lap down so we can maybe find a way to fight for a top 15 finish, you know? So man, this has been really helpful. I wish we would have picked your brain sooner, bro. I really do.
I'm glad we're doing this. I'm learning a lot from you guys too.
As far as Bristol being an indicator, it's okay. I mean, concrete drivers drive well on concrete. Concrete is a very unique surface. Goodyear struggles with concrete. Dale Jr. will tell you he wants to get rid of concrete everywhere because they have to put the cuts in concrete. And so over time, it creates some sort of bumps. And he thinks no tracks anywhere should be concrete, including the concrete on the inner part of Martinsville. I disagree with him from a fan standpoint. My favorite tracks have always been the ones that have been concrete. When we used to go to Nashville, it was concrete. For whatever reason, the cars tend to slip and slide a little bit more. Concrete is smoother from what I understand from road people. So there's definitely some overlap there, but I don't know that I'd call it. We call Dover Bristol on steroids because it is. There's only so much we can kind of take from that, though. But intermediate tracks, 1 mile tracks, half-mile tracks, the overlap there as far as cars staying on the lead lap, all those things you've talked about, Mark, absolutely are come into play here. Notable part-time starts for all 3 series, no trucks, like you said. Xfinity, Daniel Dye's interesting, getting another Xfinity shot. Taylor Gray, I can't get away from him. That's a name. Mark, you want a young name to keep watching. Taylor Gray, keep that one on your radar. Ryan Truex, look, the Truex brothers are freaking phenomenal at Dover. It is absolutely insane. Martin Truex got his first win at Dover. Ryan Truex got his only NASCAR win in the top 3 series at Dover. Martin Truex has 4 wins at 2 different tracks, the most of any wins at any tracks for him. One is Sonoma. The other one is Dover. I don't know what it is with these Truex brothers in Dover, but man, they've got it figured out. One thing we should note, to your point on Corey Heim, it may be Sam Hunt Racing, and we may not get a lot of fun from him, so to speak, in Xfinity being in the number 26, but that's extra seat time, Sean. We love the extra seat time.
Yeah, especially when you know a driver's just looking for experience. Heim himself does not have any real experience on this track itself because the trucks don't usually race at Dover, especially within the past couple of years. So it'll be interesting to see how he's going to do. But Xfinity, having that experience under his belt will be a nice warm-up for Cup on Sunday.
For sure. Matt DiBenedetto's back in the 38. Garrett Smithley, Patrick Emmerling, some cheap options. Nobody I'm really targeting. Carson Guapel, though, he ran pretty well at
Richmond. No, wait, not Richmond. Martinsville.
It was a short track. He ran quite well. That 88 car has looked good regardless who was behind the wheel. It looked good at Bristol with Bubba Pollard, or not Bristol, Richmond with Bubba Pollard.
Bubba Pollard, yeah.
Yep. Dale Jr. is going to be driving it later at Bristol this year. He did well with it last year at Bristol. It's a JRM car. It's a one-off here and there, but watch out. Carson Guapel, his you guys may remember his brother Travis, or not brother.
That's his father, actually.
His father, yeah, his father Travis. He's a good young shoe, man, and I love it when these young guys get some opportunities and some good equipment. So that one's going to be fun, and I like Caden Honeycutt. I wish this guy would get some better equipment, but Caden Honeycutt keeps just – you want to talk about one of those cheap guys that has paid off for us, getting in that 25th qualifying, 22nd qualifying spot, and then moving up to like top 18, top 15. Caden Honeycutt has done that for us a couple of times this year. I've been impressed with the young man. I wish he'd get some better equipment. So we'll see him again this week. Kaz Gralla is back in the 15 with Rick Ware. Man, again, Kaz, when he gets decent equipment, you can lock him in for like a top 20 finish at any track. It's kind of crazy. AJ Allmendinger, he has a horrible record at Dover in Cup, but he's been pretty good in Xfinity Series in Cup. I'm kind of curious about him. I actually think he could be a decent value pick. Corey Hyman, the 43, we talked about. And this is one that's interesting. Jimmy Johnson's going to be back. Jimmy Johnson has absolutely owned Dover. I mean, dominated it. There is no driver that has been more successful at Dover than Jimmy Johnson. I find it interesting that Erik Jones historically has done well there. A Jimmy Johnson driver, Legacy Motor Club. We might see Legacy look pretty decent this week. Jimmy has a very unique line. He was the first one to be talking about landing on entry, going into the corner. They used to talk about, Mark, it's so steep as they come into the corner and they cut down that it feels like the car is on a roller coaster and it's landing there at the apex of the corner. I don't think we've ever actually seen videos of it being airborne, but they talk about how it feels. It's like a weightlessness feeling. Jimmy was the first to be doing that. Look, it carried over to the rest of the Hendrick cars. I tell you what, Jimmy's price point makes him enticing this weekend, guys.
I was looking at that. The only weird part about this is I feel like this is like I don't know, man. I don't want to say a trap, but like
it kind of is.
I feel like the name recognition just brings is going to attract a lot of people to it. I have a question. When Jimmy Johnson, for example, decides that he's going to do this race, when does he decide that? 4 months ago? 5 months ago? How far out is this planned normally?
In Jimmy's case, this has been planned out since before the season started.
Okay.
They announced at the beginning of the season that Jimmy was going to do X amount of races, and they already had him listed out. Now, like Sean mentioned earlier with one of the other drivers that signed, they don't even have their races planned out yet, so they don't know. So it's one of those things. It varies on the driver, the team, the situation, and all of that. Okay. In Jimmy's case, we've known about this. This has been Dale Jr., him running the 88 car. We learned about that way early in the year. I think I'm really kind of excited on Jimmy. We have two things going for us, Mark. One, he has not run well at all. So his price point from earlier in this year when he ran Daytona to now has dropped significantly, like $2,500, $2,000. And that's because he has not performed. His ownership has been so in between. He's now getting the reputation of being washed up. I agree with you. It could very much be a trap. I'm curious to see ownership values. I'm hoping he's lower owned because I do want to target him. If nothing else, I feel like Jimmy is going to elevate the other two cars for the organization because he can go back to the teams and say, look, this is what it's doing, what it's not doing. This is what we want it to do. And he can talk to the other drivers and they can be like, oh, so I'm higher on Legacy Motor Club this weekend as a whole at $6,200. You know, Mark, you got me rethinking it because you're right. It is kind of a trap. But the way I'm looking at it is I don't care where he qualifies. I think he can be a top 15 driver.
Yeah.
And at $6,200, it's hard for me to not consider it.
100%. 100%.
So
I think it's just as good of a play as Heim or really anyone around that price.
I don't know, man. You got me sold on Heim. You really got me sold on Heim with that low ownership. Man.
So here's the other thing, though. I can't get emotionally attached to any of these guys until we have all of the information, right? Like my process, what I'm doing could completely change by the time Saturday comes around. So just depends on what we see this weekend leading up.
You know, it's funny. My wife always tells me I should stick to the stuff I feel like in the middle of the week, and I let qualifying and practice skew my thought process too much. Which I just find interesting.
There's a happy median. There's a happy median between both ends of that. But I like for football, I like NFL season, I do not make my lineups. I don't even look at lineups until Friday night. Because if I make my lineups before the final injury reports come out, I get stuck on those guys. And I get stuck or I pivot off the guys I shouldn't be pivoting off of, and I get stuck on the wrong guys.
Because you had to adjust.
Because I'm like, hey, look, I've been hearing stuff all the way leading up to this Friday. I don't want to move off this guy just because of this other injury. and my thought process is skewed from like what I should really be making my decisions off of and what my emotional bias is. And that it's being aware, like just self-awareness when you're working through your process is a massive part of this.
That is something I don't think is discussed enough, Mark. I mean, that I don't want to get all weird. That is some deep shit right there. And I think it's spot on. I mean, it is. So let me ask you this. When do you sign up for your contests?
I will reserve the contest that I want to play in once I decide what type of contest I want to do. So like sometimes I'll do MME. Sometimes I'll just do single entry. Sometimes I'll do 3 entry max. It depends on what, like I will look at the slate and the teams and the players and everything else, depending on the sport, and then determine what type of contest. So I hate to say like I have a dead set time on when I enter, but I'll go through the sports real quick and just say NFL is typically very late. NBA is like you have to do it the minute before. MLB, I can probably do that for MLB and NHL. I can get done. It's still the same day typically for those sports, but I can do my lineups hours in advance typically. NASCAR for me, NASCAR I'm the most consistent in the contests I play in. I play in single entry, high stakes, 500 people or less, maybe 600 people or less. And I'm going all in on one lineup. Sometimes every once in a while, I'll do 2 or 3. And I know that's even a little bit of a different approach in itself because I think in NASCAR, everyone's tempted to do several lineups. But like my problem is once I decide who I like, when I get into the realm of doing a bunch of different lineups and stuff, I end up I'm overexposed to all the guys that I like. So all of them are very similar builds, with the exception of a few pivots here or there. And in NASCAR, it's like one crash could destroy literally 20 of your 22 lineups if you're building a bunch. So it's like I'm kind of like I'd rather just have 100% exposure to 6 guys and see what happens this weekend. And this weekend might not be the weekend, but next weekend will. And I'll just take all the money I was going to put into those 20 lineups and put it into one. I know it's riskier and you're putting a lot more money into, individual drivers, but if you stick to that process in this specific sport, I think you will have weekends where you hit big and then weekends where you completely fall apart and crash.
Sure, all or nothing, the home runs, but you've got to be able to weather the storms. And I was kind of asking because, Jeff has suggested in football, don't sign up last minute, right? Reserve the contest Wednesday or something like that. Don't put the lineup in until, Friday, Saturday after we get all the news. And I know that I've been doing that more with NASCAR. I've been reserving my contests earlier in the week, and they often are the exact same. I try to stick to $1, 3 entry max, $1 because I've been playing with this. I used to play the higher ones. I used to consistently do a $20, $25 GPP contest back when they used to give the passing points. And I consistently would cash with my $20, $25 entry, my one lineup. I would do 5 or 6 $1 lineups. And after I kind of looked all those together, I'd put together my favorite lineup and I'd put that in the $20, $25 contest. And I was consistently doing well and was winning money and won 1,200, 1,600, whatever, got my bankroll up, and they got rid of that. And I lost all of it on football. And so when I got back in the NASCAR, my bankroll was real small. And so I had to reevaluate how I was doing it. So I've been doing a lot of these low-level dollar contests as I've been trying to play with it. Last couple of years, it was this and then a lot of this, right? This year, I've been much more – I'm not hitting home runs, but I have been consistently cashing in tournaments, which is kind of ironic because I can't seem to cash consistently in cash games. I have figured out I am not a good NASCAR cash game player. It seems easy. I don't know why I can't seem to figure it out, but tournaments is just where it's been. And now, after talking to you and seeing how you build even in the other sports, I'm understanding where I'm doing well on the tournament side, where it's been working, where it needs to be tweaked, why I'm probably consistently cashing more frequently, but not hitting very many home runs, so to speak. So I was just kind of curious how you went about, getting into your contest and reserving them. I don't think in NASCAR it's been as we don't have as many contests to choose from in NASCAR.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, you've got typically you open it up for Cup and you have $100 or $200 entry contests or more. You've got, I think they got rid of the $20 ones. I think it's a 30 or 33 now. There's a 51 you consistently come across. And then you have multiple $3, $4, $1 ones. And even those you have maybe one single entry option, maybe one 3-entry option, but a pile of 20 entry max options, right? And I refuse to do those.
Yeah, I'm not all really into the multi-entry for NASCAR. And I would say for NASCAR too, it's not like football where like the problem with football is like really good contests will fill up because there's just so many more people playing it. But like NASCAR, you can wait, in my opinion. Like sometimes I'll just do a truck series one just because I find out it's on in an hour. And
right.
There's still lineups for the main contest for that. So I think it depends on the sport as far as the demand goes. Like again, UFL is the same thing. I'll join some of my contests that I planned on joining throughout the week 30 minutes before the game starts. So just depends. But I think end of the day, it depends on my approach. But if I'm a tournament player, I'm at least eyeing contests down in every single sport, so I know what I'm looking for. So when I am ready, I don't waste any time. I'll reserve it even if I don't know my lineup yet.
Okay. And I've done that a little bit too. Like I know I wanted this contest available. I see it's filling. It's only going to have 1,200 people. It's a single entry. I want to get in, or 500 people, whatever it is. And I don't want to miss out on it because they do get with NASCAR. It gets thin right before the race sometimes.
Yes.
Not as bad for Cup, but you start to find yourself with it. Holy crap, my only option's a $5, 20 entry one or something like that. So
and because it's all or nothing, I don't look like for contests that are like 26, the top 26% cash out type of thing. I do that all the time in football. I will not join a football contest unless the top 25% cash.
Interesting.
Same thing with baseball, same thing with basketball. But NASCAR, it's like I said, it's just boom or bust. So like it doesn't matter about min cashing in NASCAR. It's like racing. If you're not first, you're last type of thing. So.
Right.
Yeah,
No,
classic.
I love it. I would say I love it. We got a little Talladega Nights hitting the mic here, man. Game on. Well, let's hit some of our drivers. Sean, hit me with your top price drivers to watch this week.
So the three that I'm going with are Martin Truex Jr., Chase Elliott, and Alex Bowman. All three of these drivers, they are really, really great at Dover historically. Chase Elliott, he's won in the next-gen car at this track in 2022. Truex won here last year. You said it before. This is totally a Truex track. We know he's hungry for a win. I'm going to be willing to put my chips right in there. And I think Alex Bowman, for the price, especially on FanDuel, my goodness, is he mispriced there so grossly at about 8,200 there. He's been really, really strong at this track in recent years. Definitely a couple of top 5 finishes. Hendrick, this is a great track for them. I'm on all three of these drivers this week.
I don't disagree with the list. We got a lot of overlap. I'm curious to hear Mark's picks here in a minute. I'm on Larson. I'm on Truex. I'm leaning Byron over Elliott. I wouldn't fight anybody that wanted to go Elliott over Byron. Here's my thing, Sean. You've heard me say it all year. That 24 team they just keep figuring things out. While the 9 teams to keep stepping on their dick, the 24 team just keeps finding a way. So numbers wise, Elliott has Byron beat on the numbers. This is more my gut shot. I'm leaning Byron. It's going to be tough for me to fade a Larson. It's going to be tough for me to fade Martin Truex. Mark, hit us with what you got.
Yeah, I mean, I think this Chase Elliott, I think he won this a couple of years ago, I want to say. So
he did
2 years ago.
Yep. Yeah. So Chase Elliott, I think, is definitely a guy I'm looking at. I will say some of these guys that I'm going to list are on the value side of the top tier. But what I will point out is that this is all preliminary, and I probably will be end up paying up for a Martin Truex or a Kyle Larson or something like that once I find out everyone's position. So, but Chase Elliott for me, Ross Chastain, I think he has really good times and numbers at this racetrack, and then Denny Hamlin, I think in this type of format, you can't go wrong with here as well.
That's fair. And I will say this, I'm heavy on HMS. Sean, I say it every week. I like to target teams. I like to target, specific cars and crew chiefs because of their success in the past. Hendrick has had, I write about a lot of it. I cover it a ton in the overview article that'll be out tomorrow. You will not get me to knock anybody that is going all in on HMS this weekend. Can't do it. They have been absolutely phenomenal. Go ahead, Sean.
I'm just going to, at this point, remember 2021, they scored the 1, 2, 3, 4 finish here.
That's right. They did. I forgot about that. They were the only ones that ever do that, if I remember correctly, too.
Gibbs, I think, has done it once, but I think that was
Gibbs do it?
I think only once, but that was years ago.
Yeah. So anyway, Ross has been good here. I'll never knock anyone going with Denny Hamlin anywhere. I won't. I know he catches a lot of flack and people like to boo him, but I think Denny's a heck of a driver. I like the fact he speaks his mind. I got no beef. That's the one thing I will say where we can get an edge on people, Mark, is I think the homerism and fandom in NASCAR from a betting and DFS standpoint is way worse than any other sport on the planet. It is absolutely mind-blowing. And I have to be better at times of, the reason I'm on Brad, I'm kind of a Brad fan. It's more of he's due. I see it coming. The speed is trending right. His finishes are it's going to happen, versus I like Jimmy Johnson, woohoo, you know what I mean? That type of thing. So I tell you what, Mark, hit us with your mid-tier guys.
Yeah, so some of my mid-tier guys, I've got Chris Buescher, I've got Ty Gibbs, and I've got Tyler Reddick. So I think Reddick coming off of the win. He's at a very good price point. I want to say he's at 8,200 on DraftKings, just $9,000 on FanDuel. So a good value on both sites. Ty Gibbs as well. I think Ty Gibbs is definitely in contention here. This is another 8K type of player on DraftKings. I think on FanDuel, he's a little bit more expensive. He's $8,500 on DraftKings, $10,000 on FanDuel. And then Chris Buescher, I think is going to, the odds pop out on him when I go to DraftKings and I look him up on sportsbooks. His price point versus where he lands as far as top 10 potential, top 5 potential, there's a pretty nice gap there. So I like all three of those guys as mid-tier plays. But I think this is what I was talking about before. There's going to be a lot of people going in this 8K range. So I want to get these guys in, but I also want to pay down and get someone super cheap too.
No, I think you hit it well earlier when you said you're going to see people go with, say, one less dominator and pick more from this mid-tier group to avoid having to pay down or take a chance on a high risk type of situation with the value plays. Because I had a very hard time narrowing down my list of 3. I'm in complete agreement with your 3. I'm in complete agreement with Sean's 3. I've got a mix between the two. I'm missing, little tidbit on this track. Dirt racers have historically done well here. Some of that is because the high line can work pretty well here. Diamonding in the corner can work pretty well here, just like Bristol. That's Tyler Reddick's background. So that's something, to keep in mind. I'm with you 100%. I think you're right. I think this is an area where having the right DFS mind here makes all the sense in the world. We all love these guys. These guys can finish top 10. If we want to find the group that can finish top 10, this group can do it. But if you go heavy here, you can't get 2 dominators. You can't get 3 dominators in your lineup. And if we have 6 different lap leaders and 3 of them lead 75 to 120 laps, we're going to want those 3 in our lineups in order to win, especially if we want to take it down. We may have to punt in this group here. But my group, I can't get away from Brad Keselowski at his price. I think the fact that he's cheaper than Chris Buescher, and I actually like Brad's odds a little bit better than Chris Buescher personally, just more of a gut shot. So give me Brad. I'm with you guys on Chris Buescher. The numbers, especially recently here, really point in his direction. And I tell you what, Ty Gibbs in Xfinity was pretty good at Dover. He also, Ty Gibbs struggled quite a bit last year. This was one of his best races early in the year last year. So I'm with you guys on Ty Gibbs. That's my 3. What do you got, Mr. Sean?
So overall with the 3, I'm pretty sure this is the one driver all of us share, Chris Buescher. So he finished top 10 in both of the last 2 Dover races. Love him in the next gen. I'm with you on Brad Keselowski. I love the price point that he's at, 7,700. I think we can't overlook that 7,000 range. There's a couple of solid drivers there that we haven't talked about. I know Bubba Wallace was one that I almost considered. He's kind of qualifying dependent. Like if he qualifies around 20th, I definitely would love to use him this week there. But ultimately, my last choice is Josh Berry. And that's just because he's a former Xfinity Series winner at this track. He has been absolutely killer at this track at the Xfinity level with 3 finishes, a second or better, 1 win. And also, he's driven at this track before in the Cup Series level as well. He's been a strong performer. He is definitely on my radar. And for the price point, 7,300 on DraftKings and on FanDuel, 7,200, definitely worth taking a shot, especially with the short track background.
My only concern with Barry is when he drove here in the Cup Series, he was in one of those HMS cars. And we know how those cars ride. But otherwise, I'm with you. I'm 100% with you.
To your point, though, Rich, you look back towards Barry at the other short track races this year. He's shown a lot of speed, especially at Bristol when he ended up leading 25 laps and finishing 12th.
Yes. No, I'm with you. And I think that's a driver that I do think could be a contrarian play for us. I'm not sure that we're going to see a ton of people investing in, even at his price point. And to Mark's point, let's say Josh Berry qualifies 15th, 16th. I think that's reasonable. All right. At 6,600, I don't know that too many people are going to be on him.
Yeah, for real. He's at 7,200 on DraftKings.
He's 72. My bad.
He's one of the cheapest within that 7,000 range. And for the expected performance, especially out of these short track events this year, he's just been looking really promising overall.
I think he's got comparable odds to Bubba Wallace for a top 10 finish on DraftKings. So,
and he's cheaper.
And like we're talking about lineup construction, there's just going to be less lineups on that low tier 7K range than the 8K range. So, and especially with Keselowski and Bubba Wallace hanging in the higher 7s, so people don't like leaving money on the table.
No, but I'm getting to the point I don't mind. Or
it's not real money.
I would say, and the other thing I like is I am learning saving money to get the extra dominators or extra opportunities for dominators, because we don't really know, right? We hope we know, right? But we don't know. But it sure is nice to have 3 drivers in your lineup where you feel pretty confident all 3 could be that driver. And as long as 1 or 2 of them hit and, do lead all those laps and stuff, you're in good shape, right? Versus, because I'll be honest with you guys, looking at the sleeper picks, I struggled. I spent more time trying to figure out my 3 sleeper picks than I did my bets, my top tier, my mid tier, and my paint schemes combined. I really struggled with this group. So I don't know who you want to lead us off, Sean, on this one.
Sure. The 3 that I got: Daniel Suarez, Ryan Preece, Justin Haley. Haley in particular, I think, is a very, very strong bargain value this week. With the price point, he is among the top 5 cheapest in the field. He's 5,400 on DraftKings, especially when you factor in his history. And even though the equipment may not be as arguably strong as some of those previous finishes, we have to remember how good he did in a Rick Ware car at Bristol, and he finished top 20 there. So,
and it held up.
something.
That's the
Yeah.
big thing. The car held up at Bristol. And to your point, Mark, how much overlap and whatnot, they beat both tracks are very hard on equipment and drivers. High speed, short radius, a lot of work in the car. It's not uncommon at Bristol, especially during the peak summer, and Dover. We'll see guys get out of the car, be nauseous, puking, collapsing, all that sort of stuff. And it's just as hard on equipment. So, Sean, that is a very good point, because I was looking at Haley, and I pulled him. I had Haley in and I yanked him out because I went, there's a big difference between Colleague and Rick Ware. But you bring up a very good point. Rick Ware equipment held up at Bristol, and a lot of people didn't, So I think that's a pretty good list.
Yeah.
How about you, Mark? Hit it.
I've got Corey Heim, Carson Hocevar, John Hunter Nemechek as my sleepers. I'm just living in that inexpensive price range of 58, 61, 6,200, that kind of range there. And actually, you brought up one of the points that I was thinking about was you mentioned a lot of driving time earlier on this podcast, and so but I think in something like this, like, could that favor the young guys? Like, I'm almost kind of thinking, like, and maybe that's why maybe that's why he's kind of a little bit more, I feel weird about him, because he's older and he's not doing it full time. So maybe he's not as great of shape type of thing. Like, I heard something, I was listening to the NASCAR radio a little bit earlier today, and they were talking about how, I forget which driver they were interviewing, but they get sore after these races where you're going a ton of laps. They just physically get sore from going round and round. So I'm thinking I'll just go with a bunch of young, cheap guys and seeing if one of these guys hits. So.
That's fair. I like all three of your young guys here, Mark. I really do. So, and it's going to be, I'm very curious to see Heim's practice times. Hocevar doesn't have a lot of experience here, as Sean brought up, because we don't run the trucks, right? John Hunter Nemechek, I'm with you, man. Legacy Motor Club. And maybe that's the angle. We like Jimmy Johnson. Maybe the angle is Heim and John Hunter, right? Equipment, setup. Jimmy does stay in good shape. He was racing full-time as little as just 2 years ago in IndyCar. So I'm not as concerned on that sort of thing. I do think him having time out and rest, he'll be fine. It's amazing. You get driving these cars and you kind of go numb while you're driving, because the adrenaline and all that, it's the 2 hours after the fact, right?
Yeah. You do like 3 lineups and just mix and match them or something with these legacy guys.
Now you're talking my kind of language, man. I can get down with some of that action.
Just get exposure to all three.
All three. Yeah. That's not a bad idea. My group here, AJ Allmendinger, he's been kind of rough in the Cup, but he's been great in Xfinity. So I'm willing to roll the dice. He's doing both races this weekend. So he's one of the few that's going to have extra seat time. John Hunter Nemechek, for all the things we've talked about. And Jimmy Johnson. My hope, this is my angle on Jimmy Johnson, because his price is finally depressed enough. I'm comfortable feeling like he'll pay at his price point. I think Jimmy and crappy equipment at this track can still bring the car home top 15, top 20, 6,200. That's the reason I like him. Bets, if we want to hit the bets real quick, we got a lot of overlap here, guys. All three of us are on Martin Truex. I don't think there's any reason to hide or get away from that. Mark, you and I are both on Byron. I said my piece earlier. I can understand Sean's pick on Elliott. Elliott, in all fairness, now let me ask you this, Mark, because this is one of those things. We both like Byron. We like Elliott. Elliott's plus 1,100 versus the plus 750 for Byron. Does that change your desire to bet, your want to bet, your betting, or anything at all? Or is it just, nope, I'm good with Byron's odds, even though similar, and I like Elliott a little bit. I'm not worried about the other, plus 300 or so.
So I like to look at everything that I'm wagering and look at the synergy between everything and the correlation. And so thought process is, it's almost like treating my plays like a portfolio. I'm a little bit more on Chase Elliott from a DFS perspective. maybe a little bit more on William Byron from a betting perspective, so I can get a little bit of exposure to both because of how great the payoff is with this type of bet. When I logistically do this, I do this the inverse way of how I approach my DFS lineup. So instead of, looking at the price point versus what their odds are, I'll go ahead and look at their odds and then look at their price point in reverse and say, okay, DraftKings really likes William Byron because he's 11,200 and the odds are the payoff is a little bit better for William Byron over here than, for example, Martin Truex, who might be very comparable in pricing on DraftKings. So sometimes I'll do that. And then that gives me exposure to some of the guys that I'm not necessarily playing in my DFS lineups. So at least I have a little bit more skin in the game in case someone crashes and just ruins my day in DFS. I still got something to play.
I love that thought. We Sean and I have done that a couple of times. Hey, this is a great play for DFS. I'm not on the bet, but hey, I'm not using this one for DFS. This is a great hedge to place the bet. You got some great odds. It's very plausible. No, that makes a lot of sense to me. Chris Buescher at plus 2,000. I think those odds just seem off. I think that's high. Like, he should probably be closer to Alex Bowman, in my opinion, at plus 16 or plus 1,500, something like that. So I like your call there. And Bubba Wallace at plus 3,000. This isn't a track I'm really thinking of Bubba Wallace on, but again, those odds seem off. So I can definitely get behind that. Like I said, I was on Truex. I'm on Larson. I don't want to be on Larson. I don't like that he's the favorite. I don't like the plus 450. But gosh darn it, he's been awfully good here, man. And I can't shake it. As much as I want the Indy 500 stuff to skew me and get me to fade him right now, I can't. He and Cliff Daniels got something figured out, man. They've got something going there. And for fun, look, this would be literally, folks, $1, like maybe $2. I don't really think Jimmy Johnson's going to win this race, but his plus 10,000 odds is just silly numbers to me that honestly, I'd be happy putting like a $5 bet on a top 10 at plus 10,000. He's got to be what, plus 380, plus 400 for a top 10. I didn't even look. I'd be happy with that. So. That's
why I have a red flag too, though. Why is Vegas so off on him? Like, I would expect that he would have better odds than this. I think
they overcorrected. Jimmy looks so bad. Yeah. Jimmy looks so bad in the last two events. People are talking about he needs to get out of the car. He's a waste of resources and all of this. So that's why I'm kind of on it, because I feel like the sentiment is boo Jimmy. And Sean will be the first to tell you, I've been pretty negative on Jimmy this year. Have I not, Sean? I mean,
Very
I've been
much
like,
so.
Right. So it seems kind of odd for me to be on him today, right?
I love it. I love it. Yeah.
That's why. The Roger Carruth bet earlier this year, I did the same thing, Mark. I'm going, what am I missing? What the hell is Vegas see that I'm missing because it's better equipment? He ran well here in the past, blah, blah, blah. Sometimes I think Vegas just overcorrects. And to be completely truthful with you, Mark, I think Sean and I could do a better job writing lines for a lot of these Vegas books on NASCAR than they do themselves. I genuinely believe that.
It's based on where the money's coming in from. So a part of it is just where the fans feel too, and where people are putting their money. So I think based off of what you're saying, when I read his lines, it's like, maybe it's just because no one is betting on him. So they're just begging people to put money on him because everyone's pretty much written him off. And maybe that's too soon. So I like
Mark, that makes a lot of sense. That makes your logic makes a lot of sense, man. So, Sean, close us out here, buddy, with your picks.
So the rest of the betting core four, we mentioned Truex at plus 600. Truex track, like I mentioned, he's really good here. Chase Elliott plus 1,100. I know you guys prefer Byron over Elliott, but this has been a really good, consistent track for Elliott. He's been gaining momentum at the right time. He's been getting a lot of solid finishes. And we have to remember, he still finished top 10 at Bristol earlier in the year. I think the momentum is on his side, and I just like the odds enough there with him. Alex Bowman, he's been really, really consistent within top 10 finishes. This has been a great track for him. He finished 5th 2 years ago at Dover. he didn't race last year due to injury, but he's still been quietly been mounting a lot of great finishes, plus 1,600. I love the odds for him. And Josh Berry is kind of my long shot just because of the short track speeds he displayed. And overall, I think that 4 car has historically been pretty solid at this track, even before with Kevin Harvick there. So plus 5,500, I definitely take a shot at that.
I love it. I love it. We ran long. I apologize, guys. I know it was running long. I was trying to stay up on top of it. We've got our core DFS picks. Do we want to rattle through these real quick here, Sean?
Yeah, we'll just say the names here, and I'll start us off here with Martin Truex Jr., 11,300 on DK, 13,500 on FanDuel. Chase Elliott, 9,900 on DraftKings, 11,000 on FanDuel. Alex Bowman, 9,300 on DK, and 8,200. That is grossly mispriced on FanDuel. And Josh Berry, 7,300 on DK, 7,200 on FanDuel.
Love it. It's funny now that we've talked to Mark, I kind of like my core here as far as the way Mark's going about building lineups. I can't get away from Truex. Like I said, I can't seem to shake Kyle Larson. So those are 2 big dogs. That's obviously going to limit you. I do think Brad's a heck of a value at 7,700. In a build like this, though, you may have to pivot away from that. I've struggled to see Jimmy at 6,200. That is, like I said, I feel like everybody is just overcorrected. I have bashed Jimmy all year long, and I'm sitting here going, that's not fair. 6,200 is not right. He is so good at this track, man. I can't shake it. So, Mark, hit us. What you got?
Yeah, I made this build. It's a preliminary build, and this build is exactly in line with what I'm saying to not do, but I've got Chase Elliott, DK, 9,900 bucks, FanDuel 11. Chris Buescher, we already talked about him, and he's a flat 8K. Ty Gibbs, 8,500 bucks, 10,000 on FanDuel, so he's a little more expensive over there. And then Tyler Reddick, he is just too darn cheap on FanDuel at 9K, 8,200 bucks on DK. So if you take those 4 guys and put them in your FanDuel lineup, there is only one option that you would choose as your 5th option, and that's Ross Chastain at 12K. I'm willing to pay up for him because you still get nice value off of him himself, despite him being a little bit more expensive than these other drivers. But do love maybe punting down to, I think you mentioned, Alex Bowman. I think that's a really good call, Sean, is Alex Bowman on FanDuel to pay up for a nice dominator like a Larson or a Truex or something like that.
Oh, for sure. Especially when Bowman is actually in good enough equipment that's capable of not just top 10, but even top 5 at that too.
That is the misprice of the entire slate on FanDuel. I wish this is where I get upset with FanDuel. Play more contests, do more, have more offerings. They just don't have the money that DraftKings does. But FanDuel, I've had my frustrations with them for a while. So,
well, if you notice, I don't have any FanDuel numbers because I am again locked out of my account. It took me forever to get back into my account, and I finally got in. I did a couple of contests. Next thing I know, I'm locked out of my account. I have tried to go through their help service. I've tried to use their whatever service. I cannot get back into my FanDuel account again. So I'm with you, Mark. I also don't like that they only allow 5 drivers. Their pricing is so variant from the top to the bottom that you have tons of availability to do what you want. I don't like that it's only 5 drivers. We only have 36 drivers, 38 drivers each week to choose from. I feel like you need some more variance. I mean, even if DraftKings wanted to go to a 7th driver and change salaries a little bit or add money, whatever, I think that would be interesting. But 5 is too little to me. So I'm with 6. I have frustrations too. I'm not going to sit here and bash FanDuel, but I'm with you, Mark.
I could bash them all day.
Hey, maybe we can have a side FanDuel rant on that, you and me, man. I'll be right there with you.
I got plenty of stories.
First, let me apologize for having it run long. I will take blame for that. I also take blame for our time tonight. So Mark and Sean, kudos to you guys. Thank you for hanging out this late and partaking. Quite frankly, Mark, this has been my favorite podcast Sean and I have done. I love working with Sean. His content is amazing, but seriously, breaking down how you build lineups, how you go about contests. These are all things that we really have never been able to dig into and talk about to the degree we have tonight. And frankly, I think we just kind of touched on some of those things. So thank you. We look forward to it again. I apologize to listeners that it went a little long. Sean will get it edited best he can. Trust me, he does an amazing job. Frankly, he makes me sound so much better than I really am. So major hat tip to Sean. Please go to FantasyGuru.com. Check out the game day MVP. Look, $39, $39.99, $40. Get you everything but football and basketball for a year. I understand hockey's running out. It's playoff time. NBA's got playoff time, so on. But this runs all the way, so it'll run through all of next year's playoffs. So please check that out. If you're into the baseball, if you're into the football, we've got you covered on that. We've got some great promos and packages going on there. Head over to FantasyGuru.com. Check it out. If you have any challenges, want to make sure you've got the best value, you do hit up Fantasy Guru support at FantasyGuru.com. Mark, you got an article dropping this week, right? That's what you told us. You kind of alternate a little bit with the UFL articles. Please go check out his UFL content. He is in Discord answering questions. You can find him at DFS Marlin on Twitter. I believe you go by DFS Marlin also on Discord, correct? Or is it Mark Hogan on Discord?
Nope, yeah, I just tried to streamline it and make it universal across the board. So
smart. I don't, and I'm an idiot. Anyway, smart. Thank you for that. I really can't thank you both enough because I got kind of crazy tonight, and you guys just continued to throw out some amazing content for us. If you like the show, hey, hit the subscribe, hit the like button. You want to follow more, you can get all our content and converse with us over on Discord. Go to FantasyGuru.com. On behalf of Mark and Sean, I am Rich Maletto, Sean Engel, Mark Hogan. We thank you. Peace.